Right. Well, in the trial itself, in the district court, there's so many pieces here that are interesting. Mm-hmm. In the district court itself, what occurred was when the trial began, the prosecutor and I decided that we were going to invoke, I guess, I know a few rules, but not very many. Rule 506. It's a rule to separate the witnesses out from each other so they can't hear each other. You sequester them outside the courtroom itself. Right. So that whoever is testifying is unaware of what anyone else has testified about. So they can't match. Seems like you're in court, you're going to say something, but you hear someone say something, you're going to match the testimony. So you do the Rule 506, so no one knows. So everybody's outside the courtroom except for this officer, Chris Taylor, who's the brother of the mayor. Okay? And let me back up a second. So when they hired this Brad Mumford guy, the city council knew something was wrong in the city. They didn't know what. All that they knew was that the mayor was protecting her brother, but they didn't know about what the specifics were.
There was legislation, and I guess, or at least talk of, I guess, some anti-nepotism and things like that. Okay, all right, okay.
Yeah. Well, they in the press on the news here, they try to pass an anti-nepotism ordinance against the mayor. Mm-hmm. Okay. She was protecting her brother. She didn't tell them what it was about, but that's how it precipitated. Gotcha. Because of my problem. But the council didn't know about me specifically or my case specifically. They just knew there was a problem.
Okay.
They ended up passing, when they try to pass it, it's in the news because she vetoes the ordinance. And then they came to an agreement and they passed it. Okay. She was protecting her brother. She was worried about being sued. The city attorney, who served as the leader of the mayor, along with the appointed police chief, who wouldn't go in and do anything about this guy who did these things, they're not going to do anything about it. They bring in a part-time attorney who liaisons between this contracted law firm doing the prosecution and the city. So I'm liaisoning with that guy. And I'm discovering all these documents, and I'm sending in these documents, I'm sending in these recordings from the district court. And I haven't collected many of the arrest records and citations out of these guys. I got a couple. I got some stuff that I know about, right?
Right.
And I'm trying to work with the city to get them to drop the case. Because they never intended it. It was never the intention to drop the case. And it goes back to another history. And they weren't going to drop the case, but they also weren't going to prosecute that guy. Even after Officer Taylor on the witness stand, I can send the recordings if you want, I'll just send them out to you. Sure. He states on the witness stand that driver number one told me at the accident scene that he was insured. And then he writes down the name of the policy, or writes down the name of the company and the policy that supposedly he's insured on that he was told. While he's holding on to a record of denial of coverage from the same company at the courthouse on the day of the trial.
See, in
the Justice Court.
That just blows my mind.
They covered for him. He also post-dated the accident report. To the following day,
if you don't,
which made him appear to be as if he was.
What was his nationality? Do you know?
They're both Hispanics. They're both from Mexico.
Okay, so
I do know.
Okay, so okay, all right.
Well, the reason is that Utah in 2009 passed its own fantasy immigration law that they called Utah Compact, and there was a big push by the Chamber of Commerce, which is headed by the LDS Church here, to pass it. And that's when I began writing about the problems. So as I was a service officer for disabled veterans, and it was about contracting for us, and I was coming in and out of Afghanistan, and they were doing this stuff. They were talking about, and they did, and they passed protections in the workplace, anti-discrimination protections in the workplace for people who were here illegally under Utah Compact. Because they passed some legislation in 2009, and Department of Workforce Services passed these anti-discrimination policies, and they weren't doing anything for veterans.
Right.
And it was happening during the war, which I'd been to by then. And I knew the reality. I knew about all the people coming back and committing suicide.
Sure.
And I knew about the unemployment rate 3 times higher than the national average. And it earned me. But I could come home to a place who would behave like that. But that was Salt Lake City. Salt Lake City is entirely different than Utah.
Right.
It is a facade, in part created by the corporation of the church, of acceptance and a gay mayor and blah, 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 blah. You know, but Salt Lake City itself, they run their own policies. You know, we had a guy named Ross Anderson who's just for lack of a better term, he's a pile of shit. Rocky. You know, he boycotted the National Convention of the American Legion while he was the mayor.
Wow.
Calling for the prosecution of George Bush, called for the prosecution of President Obama, called for the prosecution now, he's not a mayor, but of Donald Trump.
So he's a radical, basically. He's
completely. He created the proto-Antifa in Salt Lake.
If you don't mind me asking, this is just off the top of my head. Have you ever connected him to any type of Saul Alinsky-ite, any type of Alinsky-ite?
No, he was the former director of the ACLU in Salt Lake City.
Oh,
that should sum it up.
All right, okay.
And then he staffed the legal department with the ACLU. Okay.
Gotcha.
Then to get the affection of the youth from the war, spent all kinds of money from the budget, bringing in like Modest Mouse, and he had these concerts in the park every single Thursday.
Sure.
Where he would speak. And then Modest Mouse and blah, 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 blah.
And
that's what he did during the war.
I mean, admittedly,
I was calling,
I'm a Modest Mouse fan, but I could see where you could take the message that's.
Well, no, it wasn't about the people. It wasn't about the band.
Well, yeah,
that was just
In a way, it's conditioning because they follow that mindset, and that's all I was going to say. There.
It wasn't. No, it wasn't. They weren't following the band's mindset. There were lots of bands.
Yeah,
it was that they were getting free concerts, free in the park.
Yep.
Where he would speak first, and then they would be entertained.
Yeah.
And all the rules would be relaxed about drinking and smoking pot. All of them.
Gotcha.
And that's what he did.
So
it had nothing to do with the people who came and sang. Yeah.
I understand.
That's how he curried favor and created the first proto-Antifa, actually, here to state. So I was writing out against this stuff prolifically. Well, there's this informal détente between the politics of Salt Lake City and the corporation of the church. And one of the things that they had a common ground on, Utah Compact. They created their own, they legislated their own immigration law. And then over time, people who were more hardcore Republicans amended it and changed it and tried to make it comport more with some federal immigration statutes, reporting and stuff. But none of it's followed. And here's an example. This has also happened. So remember, going back to Brad Mumford. So I appeal my case like in May, June. He comes on in around that time, June, July. And I'm feeding him all these stuff that I'm finding, because it's called disclosure. I have a duty to disclose too. I find out something, I have to disclose it. So I'm disclosing it to him. At some point, things just going nowhere. Things are just getting worse.
Sure.
Yeah, and they're just getting worse and worse and worse with Brad Mumford. And so I filed, you call it a FOIA request, Freedom of Information Access, whatever. Here we call it a Government Records Access Management Act, or GRAMA. Called the GRAMA request with the city. It was explosive. The GRAMA request, remember the day I went and picked it up, how those guys looked at me, they were just like shell-shocked. They have 10 days to reply, or they can deny it, but I went and got it. The GRAMA documents showed that I had disclosed to them the use of different names. That he not only was the guy not insured, the woman who wrote the letter from the Freedom Insurance Company called me on the phone and recorded a phone call that I gave to them, stating that he had actually tried to call minutes after the accident, after he had his accident, tried to get insured, and he was not insured, showing that he wasn't insured. They wrote the goddamn letter. Not only did they have the letter, they had a tape recording from the author of the letter. That's what it showed. And they were sending it. When I would send it to Brad Mumford with all these attachments, when I got my GRAMA request back, the emails that they gave me back showed he'd forward everything directly to the mayor's brother, Officer Taylor.
Right.
And the only time they really got excited is when I obtained, as part of my discovery, a copy of the master state record from the driver's license division on these two guys, driver 1 and driver 2. And they were scrubbed absolutely, completely fucking clean.
Wow.
And that set off Brad Mumford. He wrote directly to Chris Taylor, who was the officer. He's like, how did this guy get a hold of this record? It's in black and white. It's in a fucking email.
Let me ask you. Let me stop you real quick 1 second. Now, all of this, all of the correspondence, it was official. It was an official email. It wasn't a personal, at Yahoo.
Correct.
Okay. All right.
Correct. It's all under color of state law.
Okay.
For the purposes of lawsuits or in violations of the law. Yes, it was P. Mumford at South Salt Lake City, blah, blah, blah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
All right.
And then they were sending all these emails somewhere, but they wouldn't allow me to have that trail, that email trail. And the mayor herself wrote the denial on the GRAMA request that I couldn't have them. I appealed the decision to the mayor, and the mayor said, at this time, all the way up into the time that I lost in the district court on appeal, I did not know that Chris Taylor was the brother of Mayor Wood.
Oh, okay.
And after I lost, I decided, this is so fucked up, I'm going to call and talk to people in the city council. So that's what we do in a civil society. You call, those are civil actions. Talking on the phone, writing letters, that's what civility is.
Sure.
So I began calling up members of the city council. A bunch of them didn't want to talk to me. I ended up talking to a guy, and if I should identify him or not, but it was Kevin Rapp. And Kevin, the first thing out of his mouth was, don't you know what's going on here? I'm like, no. Tell me. Because that Chris Taylor is the mayor's brother. And then it all sunk in.
Yeah.
Then I was like, okay, now I know what's going on. But I didn't tell you about one of the parts in the court process itself. Remember I talked about sequestering the driver 1 and 2 outside, and we had the Chris Taylor on the witness stand.
Sure.
And while he's on the witness stand, I get to cross-examine him. First thing I do is, by then, because they wouldn't accept the call, not the court itself, but the prosecution, Brad Mumford, kept telling people it wasn't, they covered it up. That's how they suborned the perjury of him in the district, in both the district court, where he said he was insured, and in the justice court. These are both reported statements. But Brad Mumford, as a member of the city, was